The Great Depression hit Saskatchewan harder than almost anywhere else in the world. It was a desperate time, and people responded with desperate measures. None more so than Ted and Rose Bates, here in this abandoned schoolyard on a cold winter night in December 1933. Ted and Rose owned the butcher shop in Glidden. Through the 1920s, they raised their son Jackie, ran their business. Life was good, but that would all change.
Their whole life was within themselves and their child, yes.
Harry MacDonald grew up in Glidden. His father ran the general store. And although he was older than Jackie Bates, the two were best friends.
Yeah, Jackie was a round-faced, apple-cheeked British child. That's exactly what he was. Yeah, he was different.
Jackie's father, Ted, was a jolly, outgoing man. Rose was quite the opposite, quiet and withdrawn.
She prized that little boy. I don't remember him having any playmates except me.
The Great Depression hit hard in Glidden.
This was the heart of the Dust Bowl. Major windstorms and dust storms, and I can remember the towering clouds sweeping in from the west, and it was really a frightening sort of a scene. No crops, a lot of people on relief. Most of my dad's business in selling groceries was done with relief checks at that time.
People could barely afford groceries, much less meat. Ted was forced to close the butcher shop, and the Bates decided to move west, try their luck in Vancouver. But things were no better there. By 1932, the entire country was reeling from the Depression. More than 1 million people were living on government relief. Millions more refused to take it, too proud to live on welfare. The Bates were forced to swallow their pride and apply for relief. But they were turned down and told to return to Saskatchewan. Rose was devastated. She told a friend, "I'd rather kill myself than go back." But back they went. In November 1933, they arrived in Saskatoon and again applied for relief. And again they were turned down. People could collect relief only in their hometowns. Too proud to go home to Glidden, and with nowhere else to turn, Ted and Rose hatched a desperate plan. Rose sold her rings. They used the money to rent a car. They headed west, towards Glidden, but with no intention of ever getting there. As night fell, Ted pulled into an isolated schoolyard. The three of them snuggled up in the back seat, covered in blankets to stay warm. They left the car running, sure that the carbon monoxide would kill them in their sleep. But sometime during the night, the car ran out of gas. They hadn't been able to afford a full tank. Rose woke up and called to Ted, who was groggy and sick from the poisonous gas. Jackie lay between them, dead. Distraught, Rose begged her husband to finish her off. He tried knocking her out with the engine crank, but he didn't have the strength. She was still conscious as he used the knife to try and slit her throat. Finally, he took a razor and cut his own wrists. Once again, they waited for death to take them. A farmer spotted the car. Looking inside, a sight beyond horror. He called police. Despite all they'd done, Ted and Rose were still alive. The RCMP charged them with murdering their own son. Rose is rumored to have said, "I know we'll hang, and we deserve it." 8-year-old Jackie was buried a few days later. His funeral packed the community hall. Harry MacDonald still remembers it.
We marched around the coffin, open casket. And I can remember very distinctly to this very day, Jackie Bates had died from carbon monoxide poisoning, and you could see it in his face. And you know what that entails, you know, there's a bluish look to the lips and so on. And I can remember that today, and I was only 11 years old at the time, but I can remember it today like it was yesterday.
In the meantime, Ted and Rose were awaiting trial, and the people of Glidden, the very people they'd been too ashamed to face, decided to help. They raised money and hired a big-shot lawyer from Saskatoon.
Everybody's heart went out to them. My dad was one of the people that collected money, and maybe they didn't feel this, but the town held hands out to them.
The Bates went on trial in Wilkie in the spring of 1934. Their high-priced lawyer raised doubts about how Jackie died. Was it carbon monoxide poisoning, or was it the weakened heart he'd been born with? The jury reached its verdict in 2 hours. Not guilty. Ted and Rose Bates walked out of the courthouse here in Wilkie scot-free, and over the next few years tried to put their shattered lives back together. But people say they were never quite the same without their little Jackie. I'm Bill Waiser.